Hey guys, tonight we are diving into creepy secrets of Victorian beauty salons revealed. Forget those fancy Bridgerton-style beauty vibes you see on Netflix. The real Victorian salon was less champagne and lace, and more arsenic facials, burning hair, and makeup that could literally kill you. And trust me, you wouldn't last 10 minutes inside one. Before we peel back the layers of this terrifying makeover, hit that like button and subscribe if you love strange history, and drop a comment below. Would you ever dare try a Victorian beauty treatment? Alright, dim the lights, maybe grab a snack, though, not arsenic please, and let's step inside the creepiest salon experience of your life. Picture this. London, the late 1800s. Gas lamps flicker in the mist, carriages rattle past, and behind heavy velvet curtains, a secret world of beauty rituals is waiting. But don't let the polished gloves and powdered cheeks fool you. These salons weren't havens of elegance. They were laboratories of vanity, mixing toxic brews and bizarre devices that promised perfection, and often delivered pain. You wouldn't walk out looking refreshed. You'd walk out scarred, trembling, maybe even poisoned. And yet, women lined up, desperate to keep up appearances in a society that judged every wrinkle, every strand of hair out of place. So tonight, we're peeling back the velvet curtain to expose the creepy, hidden side of Victorian beauty, the side history books don't glamorize. Now, when you hear the word salon, you probably imagine soft music, fresh lavender scents, maybe even a latte in hand while someone massages your scalp, right? Well, erase that image immediately, because stepping into a Victorian beauty salon was less espadé and more horror show with lipstick. Forget Bridgerton glamour. This was a world of arsenic facials, lead lipstick, iron tools heated over open flames, and wigs that could literally crawl off your head at night. Sounds like the set of a horror movie, but nope. This was their idea of glowing up. And here's the creepy part. People weren't dragged into these places against their will. They paid for this torture. Imagine handing over cash today for a haircut that might also shave 10 years off your lifespan. Sounds insane, right? But in the Victorian era, that was called fashion. Now, before we peel back the first layer of this toxic makeover, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button if you're into strange history, and let me know in the comments, what's the worst beauty treatment you've ever tried? Bad haircut? Weird face mask? Or maybe that one eyebrow waxing session you never talk about? Don't be shy. I promise this is a safe space, unlike the salons we're about to enter. So, dim your lights, get cozy, and brace yourself. Because tonight, you're the client. You're about to walk through those heavy wooden doors, take a seat in a stiff wooden chair, and inhale the strange mix of perfumes and coal smoke. Welcome to the Victorian Beauty Salon. And speaking of stepping inside, let's set the scene. Imagine you wake up in Victorian London, the city buzzing outside your window, and you've decided today is the day for a beauty treatment. Brave choice. So grab your shawl, mind the cobblestones, and let's walk straight into first impressions. You push open the salon door, and the first thing that hits you isn't charm, it's the smell. Not the sweet citrusy mist you'd expect at a modern spa, oh no. This is a cocktail of coal smoke, musty perfume, vinegar, and something faintly rotten. It's the kind of scent that makes you hesitate, like maybe you just walked into a haunted apothecary instead of a beauty shop. The floorboards groan under your boots as you step inside. The air feels heavy, almost sticky, from the coal soot clinging to the walls. And then you notice the chairs. Hard, upright wooden things with no cushions, lined up in a row like instruments of judgment. Forget comfort. Victorian women weren't here to relax. They were here to suffer gracefully. A faint sound of scraping echoes from across the room, metal tools grinding against teeth, or maybe scissors snipping through wiry hair. You glance around and spot a woman with her head tilted back, eyes half closed, while some poor apprentice tries to curl her hair with iron rods glowing red from the fire. The smell of singed hair curls through the air like burnt toast, except there's nothing funny about it. Next to you, a lady in a pale bonnet fans herself furiously. Her cheeks are ghostly white, almost glowing, but it isn't natural. That chalky powder is loaded with lead, and the closer you get, the more you notice tiny cracks forming in her painted face, like porcelain about to shatter. She turns, smiles politely, and you swear her teeth look too sharp, too pointed, as though she's auditioning for the role of vampire bridesmaid. You shift uncomfortably. You can almost feel every eye in the room judging your appearance, measuring your worth by how flawless or how fake you're willing to look. The unspoken rule hangs in the air. Beauty here isn't optional. It's survival. And then, the salon mistress approaches. Her dress rustles with authority, her gloves spotless, her gaze sharp. She leans in close, her perfume clawing at your nose, and whispers, "Shall we begin?" Congratulations, you've just survived your first 5 minutes inside a Victorian salon. Still think you'd make it through a full treatment? Now that you've stepped inside and met your fellow customers, it's time to see what they're actually doing to their skin. And trust me, it's worse than you think. So let's move on to the Arsenic Complexion Craze. The Arsenic Complexion Craze? You barely have time to sit down before the mistress of the salon pulls out a small porcelain jar. The label, handwritten in looping script, promises something enchanting. Arsenic complexion wafers. Yes, you heard that right, arsenic. The same poison you'd expect in a murder mystery is about to be smeared across your cheeks in the name of beauty. She dips her fingers into the cream. It's pale, smooth, almost pearly, and then brushes it delicately onto your skin. At first it feels cool, like any moisturizer, but then there's a faint sting, a tingling that creeps across your face, tightening, burning ever so slightly. You tell yourself it's fine, it must be working, right? Across the room, another client beams at her reflection. Her face is flawless, glowing like porcelain in candlelight. Imagine swallowing poison with your morning tea just so strangers might say, "My, how radiant you look today." You glance at yourself in the tarnished mirror. Your skin does look paler already, but there's something unsettling about it. It's not the glow of health, it's the glow of wax. You're not alive. You're a mannequin, a doll, a ghost in training. And yet, in this world, that's the goal. Because to be anything less than porcelain is to be judged, whispered about, and left behind. And if you think smearing poison on your face is disturbing, wait until you hear what they did to their teeth. Because across the room you hear a sound, metal scraping against enamel. That's right. Welcome to the sound of vanity. The sound of vanity. You're sitting stiffly in your wooden chair when a sound cuts through the salon air. Scrape. 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 At first you think it's someone sharpening knives, but no, it's worse. A young woman sits only a few chairs away, her head tilted back, jaw clenched. The salon assistant is holding a small metal file, dragging it slowly across her teeth. Scrape, grind, scrape again. The sound sets your nerves on edge, like chalk on a blackboard, but sharper, deeper. It vibrates in your own jaw, as though your teeth are being filed too. You can almost taste the metallic tang of enamel dust hanging in the air. Why on earth would anyone do this? Simple. Because in some circles, tiny fang-like points were fashionable. Yes, while today we pay for veneers and whitening strips, Victorians sometimes wanted to look just a little monstrous. Imagine smiling at a dinner party and flashing a grin sharp enough to bite through fabric. Romantic, right? The woman doesn't scream. She doesn't dare. She just grips the armrests tightly, her knuckles white, while the assistant works. Every scrape wears down her enamel, every grind weakens the teeth beneath. And yet, when the file is set down, and she finally dares to smile, the room nods approvingly. Beauty achieved, no matter the cost. You shift in your seat, your tongue suddenly aware of your own teeth. Perfectly fine, perfectly safe, and yet, you can't shake the question. Would you endure that kind of agony if society told you it was the only way to look desirable? And here's the kicker. While one woman risks her smile, another is about to risk her scalp, because across the room, the fire crackles, and a maid pulls glowing iron rods from the flames. Which brings us to the next ordeal: hair. If you thought teeth filing was bad, wait until you see how Victorians achieved their perfect curls. The hair-raising reality. You smell it before you even see it. The sharp, acrid bite of scorched metal pulled fresh from the flames. The curling irons glow red, as if they were forged in the same fire that makes swords. And yet, instead of going into battle, they're headed straight for your hair. The maid dips a rag into a little dish of oil, wipes the rod quickly, and with a kind of bored efficiency, wraps a section of the client's hair around the blazing iron. There's a hiss, a sizzle, and then, oh yes, that unmistakable smell of burning keratin. If you've ever singed a strand of your hair with a flat iron, multiply that by 100 and fill the entire room with it. You watch as smoke curls upward in delicate wisps. For a moment, you can't tell if it's perfume incense or just somebody's hairstyle going up in flames. The client's smile twitches as her scalp tingles with the heat, but she doesn't dare complain. Beauty, after all, demands silence. And here's the terrifying part. These irons weren't precision tools. There's no thermostat, no temperature setting, no ceramic coating. It's literally fire and guesswork. Too quick, and your hair doesn't curl at all. Too long, and, well, let's just say bald spots were a common fashion accessory. One unlucky woman lets out a sharp gasp. The iron was pressed too close, and her temple is now branded with a blister. The maid doesn't apologize. She just shakes her head and mutters, "Hold still." You grip your chair tighter, praying your turn never comes. But it will. Because hair, in the Victorian mind, wasn't just decoration. It was identity. Thick curls meant youth, fertility, femininity. Straight limp hair, a social death sentence. And so, women sat for hours inhaling smoke, enduring pain, all for a perfect ringlet that might last just long enough to survive dinner before collapsing back into frizz. Now imagine this. You've just paid a fortune to smell like a chimney, risk third-degree burns, and maybe lose half your hair in the process. And still, tomorrow you'll be back for more, because society never rests, and neither does vanity. So as the fire roars and the irons glow hotter, you wonder, is the promise of beauty really worth walking out smelling like roasted hair and coal soot? And if the curling iron doesn't get you, don't worry, your wig might, because the true crown jewel of Victorian beauty wasn't natural hair at all, but massive wigs that came with their own creepy surprises, the hair nests of horror. You glance across the salon and notice a row of wig stands, each topped with towering arrangements of hair. At first, they look glamorous, like something straight out of a royal portrait. But the longer you stare, the more unsettling they become. Victorian wigs weren't just clip it on and go. They were entire ecosystems, woven from real human hair, often bought from the poor or taken from the dead. These wigs weren't cleaned the way we'd expect. They were powdered, perfumed, sprayed with oils, and then left to sit. And when you let hair stew in powder and perfume long enough, things move in. Yes, lice, fleas, even the occasional mouse making a cozy home inside those elaborate curls. Imagine leaning in to whisper a secret at a party and suddenly spotting a tiny flea hopping across someone's forehead, or worse, a mouse nose twitching as it peeks out from a bun. The smell wasn't exactly roses either. Think sweaty scalp, stale perfume, and a faint musk of animal fur. Yet these wigs were prized possessions, signs of wealth and refinement. The higher, the heavier, the better. Some were stacked so tall that women had to duck sideways through doors. And here's where it gets darker. Wigs weren't just fashion, they were status armor. Without one, you were naked to society's judgment. With one, even if it was infested, you projected power, beauty, control. A Victorian woman would rather risk scratching herself bloody under a nest of vermin than be seen bareheaded in public. Now imagine the sheer weight of it all. Hours under a curled, powdered, crawling masterpiece that made your neck ache and your scalp scream. You sit there, smiling through the discomfort, because to remove it would be to admit you weren't good enough. And if you're wondering how they styled these behemoths, don't worry, that's coming next. Because to get those curls to stay in place, you didn't just need powder and pins, you needed fire. Now that you've survived the itchy reality of Victorian wigs, brace yourself for the next level of torture. Forget bad hair days. This was hair hell. Because the only way to achieve those perfect curls wasn't a gentle blow-dry, but red-hot irons pulled straight from the flames. Welcome to the hot iron torture. You sit stiffly in the chair as the maid approaches, carrying an iron rod that glows faintly orange from the fire. There's no thermostat, no dial to turn down the heat, just open flames and guesswork. She lifts a lock of your hair, wraps it tight around the rod, and presses it close to your scalp. The first sensation is heat, raw, biting heat. It spreads across your head, searing your skin through the thin strands of hair. You hear it next, the faint hiss as your hair begins to sizzle like meat tossed onto a frying pan. The smell follows quickly, burnt keratin, sharp and unmistakable. It floods your nose, a choking reminder that this beauty treatment is closer to a branding ritual. The woman in the chair beside you flinches as the iron touches too close. A soft gasp escapes her lips, but she doesn't cry out. She can't. To protest would mean admitting weakness, and weakness is uglier than a scar. So she sits in silence, her jaw locked, while a faint blister blooms along her temple. The maid pats it with powder and keeps going, as though nothing happened. You grip the armrest, every nerve in your scalp screaming. One wrong move, and you'll carry the mark forever. But what choice do you have? In Victorian society, smooth, elaborate curls were your crown. A woman with limp, unstyled hair might as well walk into a ballroom wearing rags. Better to risk scars than shame. And here's the cruel irony. Those painstaking curls rarely lasted. Hours of heat, smoke and agony, only for the curls to droop by evening, undone by humidity, sweat, or the weight of the wig piled on top. Imagine spending all day in a torture chair for a hairstyle that collapses before dessert is served. Still, women returned again and again, their heads scarred, the hair thinned, their scalps raw. Because beauty wasn't optional, it was currency. And in this world, you'd pay with pain. But hair wasn't the only feature sacrificed in the name of fashion. Once your curls were singed into submission, attention turned upward, to your eyebrows. And in the Victorian salon, brows weren't shaped, they were erased. Welcome to 8, eyebrows of the damned. You've survived the curling iron gauntlet, your scalp throbbing like a battlefield, when the maid tilts your chin up. Now for the brows, she says casually, like she's announcing tea service. But what she means is time for slow, deliberate torture. In Victorian fashion, thick or natural eyebrows weren't admired. No, the beauty ideal demanded thin, soft arches, or sometimes none at all. The logic? A smooth brow made a woman appear more delicate, more ladylike, more refined. Basically, the less your face looked like a human, the better. So, out comes the weapon of choice, a pair of long, sharp tweezers forged from cold iron. She pinches your first eyebrow hair, yanks, and pain shoots like lightning straight to your skull. No numbing cream, no ice pack, not even a splash of gin to dull the sting. Just you, your nerves, and the sound of tiny hairs being ripped from your flesh one by one. Pluck, pluck, pluck. The rhythm is maddening. Each hair feels like it's connected to a nerve that wasn't meant to be touched. By the 10th yank, your eyes are watering uncontrollably, though crying is out of the question. You don't want the powder on your face to streak. So you swallow the sting and pretend you're fine, while inside, your soul is screaming. And then the kicker. Once the brows are gone, the salon worker doesn't leave your face bare. No, she dips a charred cork into a bit of grease or soot and redraws your eyebrows with crude black smudges. It smells faintly of smoke. It itches against your skin, and it looks like someone pressed ash onto your forehead. Imagine spending an hour being plucked raw, only to leave the salon looking like you lost a fight with a fireplace. But here's the dark irony. This eyebrow destruction wasn't just vanity. In Victorian society, your brows signaled your respectability. A woman with bushy, wild brows was read as unruly, animalistic, unrefined. A carefully thinned or erased arch showed that you had money, time, and status. Pain, as always, was proof of your place in society. Now picture this. Someone sneezes during the evening ball, and your ash-drawn brows smear halfway across your temple. Not exactly the timeless beauty you were promised, but back then, this was elegance. And if you think sacrificing your eyebrows was unsettling, wait until you hear what they did to their eyelashes. Because in the Victorian beauty salon, lashes weren't enhanced with mascara, they were stitched. Yes, you heard me right. The eyelash stitching nightmare. If you thought eyebrow plucking was a trial, brace yourself. Because Victorian beauty salons had a treatment that sounds less like grooming and more like a scene from a medical horror novel. Eyelash stitching. Yes, stitching. With an actual needle and thread. See, long, fluttery lashes were considered the ultimate symbol of feminine beauty in the 1800s. They hinted at innocence, purity, and a kind of delicate fragility that society worshipped. But nature, being rather uncooperative, didn't always provide the ideal lashes, and so the salon offered solutions. Imagine sitting in that high-back chair, your brows already raw and stinging from the plucking. The maid leans in close with a silver thimble and a length of fine thread. She presses a hand to steady your cheek, then takes a needle thin enough to pass through fabric and lines it up with your eyelid. No anesthetic, no sterilization, just grit your teeth and try not to move. The needle pricks through the tender skin just above your lash line, pulling in a strand of hair, sometimes from another part of your head, sometimes from someone else's. Each poke feels like fire dancing across your eyelid, and tears spill down your cheeks, no matter how hard you try to stay still. One slip, one sudden flinch, and she could pierce your eye. But this was normal. After an hour of meticulous torture, you leave the salon with perfect lashes stitched into your lids. They might fall out in days, or cause an infection that swells your eye shut. But for one glittering evening, as you blinked under candlelight, society saw beauty. Historians actually recorded cases of swelling, oozing wounds, and even partial blindness from these treatments. But to the women of the time, the risk seemed worth it. Because in the Victorian world, beauty wasn't just about looking good. It was about proving your discipline, your status, and your willingness to suffer in silence. Think about it. Entire generations of women let needles dance across their eyelids just to meet an impossible standard. And the next morning, when the swelling hit, they simply powdered their bruises and carried on. The salon didn't advertise these dangers. To them, a client's suffering was just part of the business model. After all, what's a little pus when perfection is on the line? And if sewing eyelashes into your skin wasn't enough, Victorian salons had one more trick hidden in their toolkit. Something that wasn't just painful, but downright poisonous. Because next, we're stepping into the world of toxic face creams, where the secret ingredient wasn't roses or herbs, it was arsenic. The poisoned glow. If eyelash stitching sounded horrifying, just wait until you hear what Victorian women were rubbing directly into their skin. Because when it came to beauty, the deadliest weapon wasn't the needle. It was the jar of face creams sitting on a salon shelf. These creams promised the impossible. A flawless porcelain complexion with no blemishes, no wrinkles, no uneven tones. A face as pale and smooth as ivory. In an era obsessed with purity and social rank, pale skin was more than attractive. It was proof you didn't have to work in the sun, proof of wealth and refinement. But here's the sinister twist. The key ingredient wasn't lavender or rosewater. It was poison. Many of these creams were laced with arsenic and lead. Arsenic in tiny doses could bleach the skin, giving it that ghostly white glow. Lead, ground into fine powder, smoothed imperfections and created a soft, matte look. Together, they delivered results society worshipped. But behind the mirror, a silent, slow death was beginning. Day by day, women unknowingly poisoned themselves. Arsenic seeped through their pores, sapping their strength, eating away at their insides. Lead settled into their bloodstream, weakening muscles, dulling their minds. At first, the damage was invisible. Then came the headaches, the trembling hands, the hair falling out in clumps, teeth loosened, gums blackened, skin, once glowing, turned grey and waxy. And yet, when the creams worked just long enough to erase spots and lines, women kept coming back. Because what was a little illness compared to eternal youth? The salons knew the risks. Doctors warned about them. Newspapers whispered rumors of women wasting away in their prime, their beauty literally killing them. But the truth was easy to ignore when your reflection in the mirror still smiled back, porcelain and perfect. Some even believed arsenic wasn't poison at all, but a secret tonic. Pills and wafers were sold, marketed as beauty supplements. "Swallow this, and your cheeks will glow," the ads promised. And women swallowed them, never realizing they were consuming a slow, glamorous suicide. The tragedy? Vanity wasn't the only victim. Mothers passed these toxins to their children. Entire households felt the poison. Husbands kissing tainted cheeks, babies cradled against powdered skin. The cost of beauty rippled far beyond the salon chair. So, the next time you hear about clean beauty or natural skincare, remember, there was once a time when deadly chemicals were the trendiest cosmetics of all, and thousands lined up for them, smiling through sickness, convinced they had found the fountain of youth. But arsenic creams were only half the nightmare, because while women were poisoning themselves from the outside, salons offered another service to reshape the body itself. A so-called beauty miracle that didn't just scar skin, but bent bones and crushed organs. The deadly corset craze. If arsenic creams slowly poisoned women from the inside, corsets crushed them from the outside. This wasn't just fashion. It was a daily battle between the human body and a cage of whalebone and steel. The ideal figure in Victorian times was an impossibly tiny waist, sometimes as small as 16 inches. To achieve it, women didn't diet and they didn't exercise. They tightened. Laced into stiff corsets, ribs were squeezed, lungs compressed, and stomachs forced upward into unnatural shapes. Breathing became shallow, movements restricted, and fainting spells were so common that fainting couches became standard furniture in wealthy homes. Society treated collapsing as a delicate, almost romantic act. But the truth was far from graceful. It was the body's desperate cry for oxygen. Doctors documented what corsets did to the human frame. Rib cages permanently bent inward, livers displaced, digestive organs twisted and bruised. Some autopsies revealed stomachs folded almost in half, intestines knotted like ropes. And yet women endured this suffering because the alternative, being seen as unfashionable, was even more terrifying. Imagine standing in a ballroom surrounded by perfect silhouettes and feeling your natural waist spill freely under silk. That shame was a weight heavier than the corset itself. Mothers taught daughters to lace tighter with every passing year, preparing them for society's cruel standards. Corset training began in adolescence, bones still soft, bodies still growing. A girl might start with gentle lacing, but by her debutante years, she could barely breathe, every step a reminder of society's chokehold. And what about pregnancy? Corsets didn't disappear when women carried children. Some maternity corsets were designed to bind the growing belly, holding it in place. Doctors warned of miscarriages, deformed babies, and damaged wombs, but fashion silenced caution. This wasn't beauty. It was torture dressed in satin. And yet, when women looked in the mirror, what they saw was a perfect hourglass figure that society worshipped. Men praised them, artists painted them, and magazines showcased them. The suffering was invisible, hidden beneath silk gowns and jeweled bodices. But here's the chilling part. Even in death, corsets left their mark. Undertakers often discovered rib cages twisted like spirals, lungs shriveled smaller than normal, spines unnaturally curved. The body became a lifelong prisoner to fashion. And while men mocked women for fainting or for being fragile, they never admitted their role in enforcing this brutal standard. The truth? These deadly corsets weren't about women's desires. They were about controlling women's bodies, keeping them fragile, quiet, and bound. It's no wonder historians call corsets the skeleton of oppression. They reshaped not only the body, but also a woman's place in society. Because while some women suffered under crushing ribs and broken breaths, others sought miracle treatments that promised eternal youth in the most shocking ways possible. Coming up next, the shocking world of blood and leeches in Victorian beauty. The beauty of blood and leeches. If you thought corsets were cruel, wait until you step into the Victorian Salon's medical corner, where beauty was not pampered into existence. It was bled out of you. Yes, you heard that right. To Victorians, bloodletting wasn't just for treating illness. It became a twisted form of beauty therapy. Pale skin was the ultimate mark of refinement, a sign you were wealthy enough to avoid hard labor in the sun. But how did they achieve that delicate, ghostly complexion? By draining life itself. Leeches were a staple tool in the beauty kit. Women willingly let these wriggling parasites latch onto their skin, on their temples, behind their ears, even directly on their faces. As the leech sucked, it left behind tiny wounds, slowly drawing blood until the woman's cheeks looked hollow, her skin thinner, and her veins faintly visible. The effect? Fragile beauty that mimicked the sickly, porcelain look society adored. The irony? These practices were framed as science. Physicians claimed that removing bad blood refreshed the body and purified the complexion. Women were told they weren't just becoming more beautiful, they were becoming healthier. But behind closed doors, many fainted, became ill, or carried scars that never healed. Still, the pale, fragile look was worth the risk. In portraits and photographs, these women appeared as delicate as porcelain dolls, fragile beauties untouched by the sun or sweat. The price of that illusion, however, was suffering hidden behind lace veils and polite smiles. And the salons knew how to market it. They promised eternal youth, radiant purity, and aristocratic grace. In reality, they sold suffering packaged as elegance. The smell of blood, iron, and damp bandages lingered behind velvet curtains, a far cry from the glamorous image the Victorian age tried to project. Now here's the truly chilling part. Many women returned again and again, addicted to these procedures. It wasn't vanity alone, it was desperation. In a society that defined a woman's worth by her beauty, the choice was stark: endure pain or risk invisibility. The Victorian salon was no place of pampering. It was a theatre of controlled wounds, where leeches and blades played their part in maintaining the illusion of perfection. But pale skin was only one half of the story. Because while some women bled themselves weak for beauty, others chased the opposite goal: radiance. And the way they found it was even stranger. The glowing skin obsession and deadly powders. Victorian beauty wasn't just about looking pale, it was about shining. To the upper classes, true elegance meant more than ghostly skin. It meant a radiant glow, as if your very face was lit from within. But there was a sinister truth. That glow was often nothing more than poison carefully brushed onto the skin. Women flocked to salons and apothecaries in search of powders, creams, and concoctions that promised luminosity. What they received were jars laced with mercury, arsenic, and lead. These deadly powders gave an immediate effect. Skin appeared smoother, whiter, and more healthy. Under candlelight or gas lamps, the face almost shimmered, like porcelain lit with a soft glow. But the cost was brutal. Mercury-based creams seeped into the bloodstream, causing tremors, hallucinations, and even madness. Lead powders caused the skin to crack and peel, but instead of stopping, women simply applied more, hiding the damage beneath thicker and thicker layers. The very products meant to preserve beauty slowly corroded it away. And yet, salons glamorized it. Beauty attendants would whisper promises. This powder will make your skin luminous, like the Queen herself. Some powders were even named things like Venetian ceruse or the bloom of youth. Women believed they were buying prestige, grace, and immortality in a jar. But behind closed doors, the reality was grotesque. Faces became fragile masks, skin turned grey, jaws deteriorated, and teeth blackened. There are chilling accounts of women whose faces rotted beneath the very powders that were supposed to preserve them. And still, they applied more. Because the fear of aging, of fading into obscurity, was greater than the fear of sickness. The obsession grew darker still when radiance became tied to social status. Women who looked flushed or weathered were judged as working class or immoral. To be pale and glowing wasn't just fashion, it was survival in the cutthroat hierarchy of Victorian society. Salons knew this, and they cashed in. Treatments were sold like miracles. A facial cream here, a brightening tonic there, arsenic wafers you could eat to make your complexion angelic. Imagine a gathering of women sipping tea in lace gloves, nibbling on poison pills with polite smiles, all in the name of beauty. And here's the disturbing twist. Many women knew the powders were dangerous. Whispers spread about skin turning grey, about arsenic slowly killing the body. But the cultural pressure was too heavy. To age naturally was to vanish. To resist fashion was to invite ridicule. So they chose to glow in society's eyes, even if it meant fading in life's. The Victorian salon was no sanctuary of self-care. It was a laboratory of illusions, where radiance came from rot, and beauty was painted on with poisons. But glowing skin wasn't the end of the Victorian obsession. Once the face was pale and radiant, attention shifted to the windows of the soul. Because in Victorian salons, eyes weren't just for seeing. They were canvases to be manipulated, widened, and made unnaturally bright. We'll uncover how Victorian beauty seekers risked blindness just to make their eyes look more enchanting. The alluring but deadly eye rituals. After painting their skin pale and luminous with powders of poison, Victorian women turned to their next battlefield of beauty, the eyes. In their world, the eyes were seen as the truest sign of femininity, desire, and even morality. A woman with large, glassy, sparkling eyes was thought to be more innocent, more attractive, even more virtuous. Writers and poets compared women's eyes to shimmering pools, stars, or gateways to heaven. Society ate it up. But how could a woman create that effect, especially when tired eyes and poor lighting made them appear dull? That's where Victorian salons stepped in, offering what we might call today one of the most horrifying treatments ever, belladonna drops. Yes, literally drops made from deadly nightshade plant. Applied directly to the eyes, these drops forced the pupils to dilate, giving women that wide-eyed, doe-like look that was so highly prized. Under gaslight or candlelight, the effect was mesmerizing. A woman's gaze looked dreamy, romantic, almost hypnotic. Admirers described the look as otherworldly, as though her eyes glowed with eternal youth. But the cost? Terrifying. Belladonna didn't just dilate the pupils, it blurred vision, distorted depth, and left women disoriented. Some fainted after using it. Others stumbled into walls or couldn't read simple text. Prolonged use led to permanent damage, sensitivity to light, blindness, and in extreme cases, even death. Yet despite the dangers, salons marketed belladonna drops as the ultimate weapon of seduction. Attendants would lean in close, whispering, "With just one drop, your eyes will hold a man's heart." Imagine rows of women in corsets and lace, tipping poison into their eyes, blinking rapidly as their vision blurred, while attendants assured them it was a small price for beauty. And this obsession wasn't limited to belladonna. Some women used perfumes near their eyes, believing the vapors would make them glisten. Others used mixtures of vinegar or lemon juice to redden the whites of their eyes, making them appear brighter by contrast. The pain? Intense. But again, pain was normal in the pursuit of beauty. In some cases, the blindness was almost symbolic. A woman may have lost her ability to see clearly, but society praised her for looking dreamy and ethereal. To be fragile, half-blinded, and vulnerable was not a flaw in Victorian society. It was an aesthetic. Beauty was bound tightly with suffering, and the salon was its cruel theatre. The paradox is chilling. Women risked their vision, the very sense that allowed them to perceive the world, all for the fleeting approval of men and society. They traded clarity for allure, truth for illusion. And in the soft lamplight of Victorian parlors, when a woman's dilated pupils shimmered like black jewels, few dared to ask, was she beautiful, or was she just blinded by poison? But the eyes were only part of the mask, because once you had pale skin and glassy eyes, you needed the perfect smile to match. And just like with the skin and eyes, the Victorians had their own twisted ways of turning mouths into weapons of allure. Next, in scene 15, we'll step into the world of Victorian lip and tooth rituals, where the quest for a dazzling smile was paved with strange dyes, dangerous chemicals, and more than a few grim consequences. The smile of secrets, lips and teeth in Victorian beauty. If the eyes were the windows to the soul, then the Victorians believed the lips and teeth were the gates of desire. A single smile could make or break a reputation, and salons knew exactly how to exploit that pressure. To begin with, lips were never meant to look natural. No. Victorian beauty manuals described the ideal lip as plump, flushed, and softly parted, the kind of mouth that suggested innocence but carried just enough temptation to stir the imagination. Women were told their lips should look like rose petals, bright, moist, and delicate. But how did they achieve that look in an age without modern lipsticks or glosses? The answer is both fascinating and deeply unsettling. Lip rituals. The first lip tints weren't the carefully crafted tubes we know today. Instead, women dabbed on dangerous concoctions of carmine dye, mercuric sulfide, and red lead, substances now known to cause mercury poisoning and organ failure. Some even used mixtures of vinegar and crushed beetles to achieve a bloody red stain. Imagine the scene inside a salon, an attendant leaning over, smearing a sticky crimson paste onto a woman's lips with a tiny brush. At first, the result was stunning. Her lips glistened, vibrant against her pale, powdered skin. But as hours passed, the chemicals began to burn, crack, and dry the flesh, leaving lips raw and swollen. And yet, this damage only added to the desired effect. Inflamed lips appeared fuller, almost like the modern obsession with fillers. A slightly painful swelling became a fashion statement, proof of one's devotion to beauty. Some women even went further. They rubbed irritants like cinnamon oil or cayenne pepper directly onto their mouths to create an artificial plumpness. The sting was excruciating, but the redness it produced was considered alluring. Beauty, once again, meant suffering, and salons profited by turning pain into an accessory. Tooth rituals. But what good were red, swollen lips without perfect teeth to frame them? Unfortunately, dentistry in the Victorian era was closer to nightmare than glamour. Toothpaste as we know it didn't exist. Women instead brushed with powders made from brick dust, charcoal, or even crushed cuttlebone. These powders scoured the enamel away, leaving teeth sensitive and prone to decay. And when teeth inevitably rotted, that's where the horror deepens. False teeth were popular, but they were often carved from animal bone, ivory, or, most chilling of all, the teeth of the dead. Some dentures were literally made from teeth pulled from soldiers' corpses on battlefields like Waterloo. Imagine flashing a smile at a dinner party, knowing your pearly whites once belonged to a fallen soldier. Even for those who could afford cosmetic dentistry, solutions were brutal. Dentists whitened teeth with corrosive acids, which stripped away protective enamel, making them brittle. Salons advertised mouth rinses containing ammonia or chlorinated lime, both of which caused burns and bleeding gums. And yet, despite all this suffering, the smile remained a Victorian obsession. A woman's lips and teeth weren't just markers of beauty, they were moral symbols. Rosy lips and clean teeth suggested health, purity, and refinement. Blackened teeth or pale lips could ruin a reputation, marking someone as poor, diseased, or unworthy of marriage. In the end, the Victorian smile was a mask, one painted with poisons and polished with bone dust, hiding a painful reality beneath. But beauty didn't stop at the face. Once a woman had pale skin, hypnotic eyes, and a painted smile, there was still one final frontier left to conquer: the hair. And Victorian hair rituals were perhaps the most dramatic of all. Tangles of false locks, strange oils, heated irons, and even ingredients that will make your stomach turn. We'll open the door to the hair salons of the era, where vanity and danger twisted together strand by strand. Crowns of poison, the hair obsessions of Victorian salons. If lips and teeth framed a face, then hair was the crown of Victorian beauty, the ultimate marker of femininity, status, and allure. A woman's hair wasn't just hair, it was her identity. Manuals and gossip columns of the time declared that a lady's virtue lies in her locks, and salons promised to transform dull, lifeless strands into shimmering rivers of gold, raven silk, or chestnut fire. But beneath the glossy curls and intricate braids lay one of the most dangerous corners of Victorian beauty culture: the reign of the wig and hairpiece. Few women could ever hope to grow the massive hairstyles that fashion demanded. Instead, they turned to wigs and elaborate hairpieces. These weren't just dainty extensions, they were towering constructions, often weighing several pounds. Most wigs were crafted from human hair, imported in bulk from poorer countries. It was whispered that much of it came from desperate women who sold their locks, or even from corpses. A lady in London might unknowingly wear the hair of a peasant girl from Eastern Europe, or the scalp of the recently deceased. And with wigs came infestations. Hairpieces, if not carefully treated, teemed with lice and fleas. Imagine sitting at a lavish dinner party, jeweled tiara glinting in the candlelight, while beneath your elegant updo, insects crawled unnoticed. The war on grey. Grey hair was considered shameful, a betrayal of youth. Salons advertised miracle tonics to restore natural vibrancy, but these so-called cures were often laced with lead, mercury, and silver nitrate. Women dutifully massaged these dark liquids into their scalps, unaware that the chemicals seeped into their bloodstream, causing tremors, headaches, and even gradual paralysis. Some mixtures stained the skin black, leaving women with bizarre streaks across their faces and necks, stains they had to hide with layers of powder and veils. Yet still, they returned for more. The promise of eternal youth outweighed the creeping sickness that followed: curling, straightening, and burning. The Victorians adored curls, soft ringlets that framed the face or cascaded down the shoulders. But natural curls were rare, so salons introduced terrifying tools: heated curling irons. These irons were heated in open flames, glowing dangerously red. One wrong move and hair could ignite, filling the parlor with the stench of singed locks. Entire patches of hair were sometimes lost in a single appointment. Yet, women tolerated this, because curls symbolized charm and femininity. For those who wanted sleekness instead, acidic straightening washes were offered. Some contained quicklime, which could literally eat away the hair and burn the scalp raw. Hair oils and tonics. To maintain shine, women rubbed oils into their hair. Some were harmless blends of almond or castor oil, but others were far more sinister. Popular products included bear grease, whale oil, or concoctions preserved with arsenic. These not only smelled rancid, but could trigger hair loss, ironically worsening the very problem they were meant to fix. Salons swore by these mixtures, marketing them as growth elixirs that promised thick, luxurious tresses. The reality? Many women left with damaged scalps and thinning patches, but they returned again and again, desperate for results. The symbolism of hair. Beyond the physical pain, hair carried deep social meaning. Long, glossy hair was a symbol of purity and fertility. Cutting it short was considered scandalous, almost sinful. Brides were expected to flaunt their length. Widows were told to hide their locks under black veils, and young girls were forbidden to style their hair elaborately until they came of age. Hair wasn't just decoration, it was morality woven into strands, and salons, knowing this, turned hair care into both a ritual and a business. But while the hair was the crown, there was still another battlefield left untouched: the body itself. Smooth skin, graceful curves, and delicate silhouettes didn't come naturally. They were engineered, forced, and painfully sculpted. In scene 17, we step into the world of body rituals, where corsets crushed ribs, waistlines shrank to dangerous extremes, and tonics promised to reshape the female form from within. Here, beauty wasn't just worn, it was carved into the flesh. Corsets, curves, and the torture of the Victorian body. If hair was the crown and makeup the mask, then the true battlefield of Victorian beauty was the body itself. The silhouette of a woman was expected to embody purity, delicacy, and control. But this silhouette was no natural gift. It was violently engineered. The corset craze. Every fashionable lady of the 19th century owned at least one corset. Made from stiff whalebone, tightly laced cotton, or even steel, these garments promised the coveted hourglass figure. A tiny waist, full bosom, and rounded hips. The standard waist measurement desired? 17 to 18 inches. For comparison, the average natural waist was closer to 24 or 25. To achieve this reduction, women would lace themselves so tightly that breathing became shallow, almost impossible. Everyday tasks like walking upstairs or sitting too long could leave them dizzy, faint, or gasping for air. Doctors warned that such compression displaced organs, crushed ribs, and weakened the spine. Autopsies of corset wearers revealed livers warped into grotesque shapes, lungs compressed, and stomachs pushed upward. But these warnings were dismissed. Fashion was stronger than medicine. In fact, fainting in public became almost fashionable. A swoon was seen as a sign of delicacy, refinement, and femininity. Ladies even carried ornate smelling salts in jeweled cases to revive themselves after their corset robbed them of breath. The layers of suffering. A corset was only the beginning. Over it came layers of petticoats, bustles, crinolines, and dresses that weighed up to 20 pounds. The sheer heat and heaviness of these garments caused women to sweat profusely, but even this was masked with perfumes and powders. And then came the tight lacing competitions. Among the wealthy, it became a point of pride to show just how small one's waist could become. Young girls were trained early, laced tighter and tighter each year until their bodies permanently reshaped. By adulthood, many could not live without a corset, as their muscles had weakened beyond repair. Slimming tonics and poisonous pills. For those who couldn't shrink enough through corsetry alone, salons and apothecaries offered slimming tonics. These elixirs promised to burn fat and reduce appetite, but their ingredients were chilling. Some contained arsenic in trace amounts, dulling hunger while slowly poisoning the body. Others used strychnine or antimony, chemicals that caused nausea, vomiting, and in high doses, death. Yet women returned for more, convinced that the discomfort was a sign of progress. There were even pills laced with tapeworm eggs, marketed as a natural solution for weight control. Imagine willingly ingesting a parasite in the name of fashion. This was the level of desperation. The dangerous ideal. Magazines and fashion plates glorified the wasp waist and vilified natural shapes. A woman who did not conform risked ridicule, whispers of laziness, or the ultimate insult, being considered masculine. This obsession with body shape wasn't only about beauty, it was control. A tightly laced corset didn't just sculpt the body, it restricted movement. Women could not run, bend freely, or even sit comfortably. In a society that demanded female obedience, the corset served as both fashion and metaphor. Beauty bound by suffering. But beauty didn't stop at the waistline. The Victorian obsession went even deeper, into the very skin itself. Smooth, flawless complexions were demanded at all costs, leading women to smear their bodies with powders and ointments filled with hidden dangers. We enter the world of Victorian skin rituals, where glowing white skin came at the price of disease, disfigurement, and sometimes a slow and painful death. Skin deep, the deadly quest for a perfect complexion. In Victorian society, skin was more than just skin. It was a woman's reputation, her ticket into high society, and in some cases, the deciding factor in marriage proposals. Pale, porcelain-like skin was the standard of beauty, but also a symbol of purity, wealth, and refinement. After all, only women of leisure could afford to stay indoors, untouched by the sun, while laborers' skin darkened with outdoor work. But behind this flawless facade was a horrifying truth. Maintaining such skin required a toxic arsenal of creams, powders, and treatments that slowly destroyed the body. The arsenic complexion craze. The most infamous method was arsenic. Yes, actual arsenic. Women consumed arsenic wafers, tiny dissolvable tablets that promised to purify the blood and create luminous. Arsenic would initially dilate the blood vessels and give the illusion of rosy, youthful skin, but over time, it accumulated in the body, leading to hair loss, stomach pain, paralysis, and even organ failure. Despite the risks, these wafers were sold openly in beauty shops and apothecaries, often packaged in delicate boxes with elegant lettering, as if poison could be made glamorous. Mercury and lead in the powder jar. If a woman didn't dare swallow poison, she could apply it instead. Face powders were often made from white lead, which clung to the skin and gave it that coveted alabaster finish. But lead seeped through the pores, leading to skin lesions, blackened teeth, and premature aging, the very things it was meant to hide. Some formulas also contained mercury chloride, advertised as skin purifiers. Mercury did lighten blemishes, but at a terrible cost: tremors, memory loss, and mental decline. Imagine seeking beauty, only to lose your mind in the process. The irony? As the poisons ate away at their faces, women were forced to layer on even more powder to cover the damage, an endless cycle of destruction. Salon rituals, the skin under siege. It wasn't just powders and creams. Victorian salons offered treatments that bordered on torture. Women endured acidic masks made from buttermilk, vinegar, or even hydrochloric acid, intended to peel away the outer layer of skin. Some treatments left women with raw, bleeding faces for weeks, but the salons promised the pain would reveal new, younger skin. Freckles were despised, so caustic solutions of ammonia or carbolic acid were dabbed onto the skin, burning away the pigment. Scars, infections, and permanent damage were common, but clients returned anyway, desperate to maintain the illusion of perfection. The social pressure. This wasn't a matter of vanity alone. A single blemish, a patch of discoloration, or the hint of rough skin could brand a woman as unclean or unfit. Men seeking brides demanded flawless complexions, and gossip about a woman's skin could ruin her standing in society. For poorer women, powders offered a way to fake wealth and respectability. For the wealthy, the treatments became a prison, an endless fight against time, sunlight, and biology itself. In the end, the pursuit of skin-deep beauty often left women disfigured, ill, or dead, all for the sake of looking untouchable. But skin was only part of the obsession. Victorian beauty culture didn't just demand a flawless face, it demanded perfect teeth. And just as with hair, makeup, and skin, women would go to terrifying extremes to achieve it. In Scene 19, we step into the unsettling world of Victorian dentistry and teeth rituals, where beauty salons doubled as dental chambers, and where the pursuit of a dazzling smile often meant enduring unimaginable pain, or surrendering your own teeth entirely. A smile of horror, Victorian dentistry, and teeth rituals. In the Victorian era, a smile wasn't just about charm. It was a mark of breeding. White, even teeth were linked to wealth, refinement, and good health. But here's the creepy truth. Keeping that smile intact was one of the most painful, dangerous, and bizarre beauty rituals of the time. Unlike today, when dentistry is sterile and clinical, Victorian beauty salons often doubled as crude dental workshops. You might go in for a hair treatment and leave with your teeth filed, pulled, or painted with strange concoctions, all in the same chair. The quest for white teeth. Victorians were obsessed with pearly whites, but instead of toothpaste and modern dental care, they turned to terrifying whiteners. Nitric acid was a common treatment. Applied to the enamel, it stripped away stains instantly, but also thinned the tooth structure until it cracked or crumbled. Clients were told not to worry. They could always come back for another touch-up. Some women rubbed their teeth with powdered pumice stone or cuttlefish bone, which worked like sandpaper. It removed surface stains but eventually ground the teeth down to stubs. For breath, salons recommended rinsing with ammonia or vinegar, which corroded enamel while leaving behind an acrid chemical taste. And if a client couldn't afford these salon treatments, she might mix soot and salt at home, scrubbing until her gums bled. False teeth, a market of the macabre. But what happened when whitening destroyed the teeth completely? That's where false teeth came in, and this is where things take a truly grim turn. Dentists and beauty salons advertised false teeth made of ivory, porcelain, or human teeth. Yes, human teeth. Where did they come from? The most infamous source was the battlefield. After the Napoleonic Wars, scavengers pulled teeth from the mouths of fallen soldiers and sold them to be cleaned, polished, and fitted into dentures. These grisly Waterloo teeth became a booming trade, worn proudly by wealthy clients who had no idea, or perhaps didn't care, that their smile came from the dead. Sources were graveyards, where so-called resurrection men dug up bodies for teeth to sell to dentists. In darker cases, there were rumors of murders committed for teeth, because a single perfect set could fetch a fortune. Imagine sitting in a Victorian salon, smiling in the mirror, not realizing your elegant dentures once belonged to someone buried in the earth. The painful procedures. Dentistry was rarely gentle. Anesthetic was primitive, and in many cases, non-existent. Extractions were performed with pliers, sometimes right there in a beauty salon. Screams echoed through the parlor, while other women continued their treatments unfazed, because pain was simply part of beauty. Some dentists experimented with gold or silver fillings, but infection often followed. Abscesses, swollen faces, and rotting gums were common. Yet women returned, determined to keep their appearance intact. The social trap. Why go through all this torment? Because bad teeth weren't just unattractive, they were seen as a moral failing. A woman with yellowed, crooked, or missing teeth could be judged as unclean, poor, or even unworthy of marriage. For men, discolored teeth were linked with drunkenness and weakness. In high society, you were expected to smile through the pain, and so Victorians surrendered their mouths to acids, grave-robbed dentures, and brutal extractions, all in the name of beauty. But teeth weren't the only part of the court in this cycle of beauty suffering. Next came the Victorian obsession with body shaping. Corsets, waist training, and bizarre slimming remedies promised an elegant silhouette, but often left women bruised, breathless, and broken on the inside. In Scene 20, we step into the suffocating world of corsetry and body modification, where fashion wasn't just about clothes. It was about reshaping flesh, bone, and even internal organs to fit society's brutal standard of beauty. Corsets, the cage of beauty. If teeth were the symbol of health, the waistline was the symbol of status. In Victorian society, beauty wasn't measured by curves or fitness. It was measured in inches. The smaller the waist, the higher a woman's value in the social hierarchy. Magazines, fashion plates, and etiquette books drilled in the same message. A respectable lady should have a figure shaped like an hourglass, with shoulders and hips blooming outward from a tightly cinched waist. A waist measuring 18 inches was not just admired, it was envied. But nature rarely grants such proportions, and that's where the corset stepped in. The corset as armor. The corset wasn't a soft garment. It was a cage of whalebone, steel, and tightly woven fabric, laced so brutally that it could cut into flesh, bruise ribs, and reshape the body itself. Women began wearing them as children, so their bones and posture developed around the rigid frame. By the time a young lady came out in society, her waist was already trained into submission. Removing the corset wasn't just uncomfortable, it felt impossible, like her body could no longer hold itself upright without it. The corset became both armor and prison. It gave her the figure society demanded, but it also robbed her of natural movement and breath. The daily struggle. Imagine dressing in the morning. A maid would stand behind, pulling the laces tighter and tighter until her mistress gasped for air. The goal was not comfort. It was the moment when the waist looked impossibly narrow, almost fragile. Everyday activities became a challenge. Breathing was shallow, forcing many women to faint from lack of oxygen. Digestion was compromised, with food often sitting painfully in the stomach. Pregnancy became dangerous, as corsets pressed against the womb. And walking upstairs could leave a woman trembling with dizziness. But fainting wasn't seen as a medical emergency. It was seen as delicate, even fashionable. A swooning lady was considered elegant, fragile, and in need of a gentleman's care. Society romanticized her suffering. Medical consequences. Doctors began to notice the horrors behind the trend. Autopsies revealed displaced organs, livers pushed downward, ribs permanently bent inward, lungs compressed into half their natural size. There were cases of broken ribs piercing lungs, causing slow, agonizing deaths. Others developed chronic indigestion, constipation, or organ prolapse. Yet warnings from physicians were dismissed as exaggerated, or even unladylike. After all, beauty demanded sacrifice. Some women took corsetry to extremes. Tight lacing competitions were held, where ladies bragged about reducing their waists to unnatural sizes. Letters and diaries from the time show women proud of enduring the torment because it meant they belonged to the fashionable elite. The psychological trap. But the corset was more than physical pain. It was psychological warfare. A woman who removed her corset risked being called slovenly or loose. Loose waists suggested loose morals. Husbands and suitors expected women to be shaped by fashion, not comfort. Mothers forced daughters into tighter laces, warning them they'd never find a husband otherwise. Even those who secretly hated corsets wore them, because without that hourglass figure, they risked ridicule, exclusion from society, and even the loss of marriage prospects, the very foundation of a Victorian woman's survival. In this sense, the corset wasn't just clothing. It was social control stitched into fabric and bone. A dark symbol of control. To us today, corset might look like costume pieces from a bygone era, but to Victorian women, they were shackles disguised as fashion. Their bodies weren't there to shape freely. They were molded, bruised, and sometimes broken to fit the ideals of men and society. The corset both admired and feared, a symbol of elegance on the outside and a hidden torture device on the inside. But corsetry wasn't the end of Victorian body experiments. The obsession with shaping and sculpting beauty didn't stop at the waist. It extended to the entire body. From bizarre slimming teas laced with dangerous chemicals, to fat-reducing cures that poisoned the blood, Victorian salons and doctors offered miracle fixes that often left clients weaker than before. In Scene 21, we'll dive into these deadly Victorian diet fads and body tonics, where women drank and swallowed their way into danger, all for the illusion of grace and refinement. Victorian diets and dangerous tonics. If corsets were the visible cage of Victorian beauty, then diet fads were the invisible poison running through the veins of society. Because while a cinched waist could shape the body from the outside, women were told they needed to control it from within. Doctors, salons, and even shady traveling salesmen promised miracle cures for weight loss, pale skin, and delicate figures. But behind the glossy advertisements and flowery promises lay potions, powders, and pills that were nothing short of lethal. The Victorian ideal: pale, thin, and weak. Victorian beauty wasn't about looking healthy. It was about looking fragile. A soft, pale complexion suggested woman of wealth who didn't need to toil in the sun. A thin frame implied refinement and self-control. The less robust a woman appeared, the more desirable she seemed. This ideal opened the door for an entire market of diet remedies. And unlike today's wellness trends, these were not green juices or low-carb recipes. No, Victorian remedies were laced with some of the most toxic substances known to science. Arsenic wafers, the poisoned beauty secret. One of the most infamous remedies was the arsenic wafer. Yes, arsenic, the very same poison used for rat bait and murder mysteries. Advertised as safe and effective, these little candies promised to give women the perfect complexion. Pale, flawless skin with no blemishes. Women began drinking glasses of vinegar daily, believing it would keep them thin. And in a way, it did. Vinegar suppresses appetite. So many Victorian women ended up malnourished, fainting frequently, and damaging their stomach linings. Combined with corsets, the effects were devastating. Women were weak, dizzy, and sometimes bedridden, yet praised for looking dainty. Others resorted to extreme starvation. Diaries from the period mention young ladies nibbling on nothing but oranges, tea, or broth for weeks, terrified of gaining weight and losing their fragile appearance. Soap pills and chalk tablets. Yes, you heard right, soap pills. Some doctors and quacks claimed that eating soap would cleanse the body of fat. The logic: soap dissolves grease, so why not let it dissolve body fat from the inside? Of course, it didn't work that way. Instead, it caused internal damage, bloating, and sometimes chemical burns inside the stomach. Chalk tablets were another fad, eaten for a pale, clean complexion. Women literally consumed chalk dust, damaging their teeth and digestion, but gaining that sickly white look prized at the time. Cocaine and opium tonics. When diet pills weren't enough, stimulants became the next weapon. Cocaine tonics were marketed as appetite suppressants, giving women energy while reducing their desire to eat. Advertisements claimed it helped ladies maintain their figures without sacrificing elegance. Opium-based teas and syrups were also common. Taken in small doses, they dulled hunger and gave a dreamy, languid appearance, perfect for women who were supposed to look delicate and passive. Of course, this often led to addiction, wasting away, and death. The business of beauty. These tonics and remedies weren't just whispered secrets. They were big business. Victorian newspapers and magazines were filled with advertisements. For the lady who wishes to maintain her grace and slender form, Dr. Townsend's special elixir guarantees refinement without exertion. Shady salon owners and traveling vendors preyed on women's insecurities, selling them pills and powders that promised to make them angels of society. The reality: they became prisoners of addiction, poison, and illness, all while being told they were finally beautiful. The dark irony. The cruelest part was this: society admired the very symptoms of poisoning and starvation. Pale skin, fainting fits, delicate weakness. These weren't seen as warning signs. They were seen as fashionable virtues. In chasing beauty, women were applauded for slowly killing themselves. And those who resisted these remedies? They were called coarse, unfashionable, or unworthy of admiration. But Victorian obsession with beauty didn't stop with the waist or the stomach. It extended to every part of the body, even the skin, hair, and eyes. In scene 22, we'll enter the unsettling world of Victorian cosmetics and makeup rituals, where powders, creams, and eye drops promised beauty, but often contained lead, mercury, and deadly nightshade. Because in the Victorian era, painting your face wasn't just vanity, it was a dangerous gamble with your very life. From the moment we stepped into the grand Victorian salons in scene 1, we were greeted by a world that sparkled with chandeliers, perfumes, and promises of elegance. But as each scene unfolded, we discovered the truth. Beneath the silks, powders, and corsets lay a dark theater of suffering, obsession, and danger. We saw how women were laced into corsets so tight that ribs cracked and organs shifted, yet they smiled through the pain because society demanded it. We followed them into salons where hair was soaked in strange brews, where skin was coated in powders laced with lead, and where lips were tinted with poisons masquerading as beauty aids. And we watched, almost helplessly, as they swallowed miracle tonics that promised grace but delivered only addiction, starvation, and death. Arsenic wafers, vinegar diets, soap pills, cocaine tonics, each one a ritual of vanity that blurred the line between beauty and self-destruction. It wasn't just about appearance. It was about power, class, and survival in a world where a woman's worth was measured by her frailty, her paleness, and her willingness to endure. Beauty became both a weapon and a curse, a mask that hid suffering while displaying society's cruelest expectations. By scene 22, when we uncovered the powders and cosmetics made from mercury, lead, and deadly nightshade, the full picture came into focus. The Victorian salon was not simply a place of pampering. It was a stage for rituals of transformation, where every treatment carried whispers of danger. Women weren't just chasing beauty, they were bargaining with death, one drop, one pill, one powder at a time. And perhaps the most haunting part, society applauded it all. Fainting spells were seen as charming. Pale, sickly faces were considered delicate. A body weakened by starvation was praised as refined. The very symptoms of poison and pain were elevated as the hallmarks of elegance. So, what have we really learned? That the Victorian beauty salon wasn't simply a chamber of refinement. It was a theatre of sacrifice, where comfort, health, and even life itself were traded for an illusion. An illusion so powerful, it enslaved a generation of women under the weight of corsets, the haze of powders, and the lure of poisons disguised as cures. It's easy to look back and laugh at these rituals, to shake our heads at arsenic wafers or vinegar diets and think, how could they believe this? But here's the chilling question. How different are we today? Yes, the poisons are gone from our powders, but the obsession remains. The pursuit of beauty, at any cost, still haunts us. Whether it's extreme dieting, dangerous cosmetic surgeries, or miracle cures sold online, the Victorian spirit lingers, whispering through time. You must suffer to be beautiful. And that's why these stories matter. They are not just curiosities from the past. They are warnings, echoes of mistakes we still risk repeating. If you found this journey through as fascinating, eerie, and thought-provoking as I did, don't let it end here. Hit that like button to show your support. It tells me you enjoy these deep dives into the strange and unsettling corners of history. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, so you don't miss the next episode where we'll uncover even more bizarre, creepy, and fascinating rituals from the past. And most importantly, drop a comment below. Which Victorian beauty ritual shocked you the most? Was it the corset torture, the arsenic wafers, or the deadly powders? I'd love to hear your thoughts and start a conversation. Because history isn't just something we watch, it's something we share, question, and learn from together. So, as the last candle in our Victorian salon flickers out, remember, beauty has always had a price. In the 19th century, that price was measured in blood, breath, and bone. Though centuries have passed, the question remains the same. How much would you endure for beauty? Until next time, sleep well, if you can.